We've made it to my favorite Disney movie and Disney princess of all time. Tiana made history in 2009 as the studio's first African-American princess. She also broke ground in my heart. If you've ever perused my channel and wondered what princess I was especially standing, wonder no longer, it's Miss Tiana. And while The Princess and the Frog is my favorite Disney film, I need to put something out there. The Princess and the Frog dips more than just a toe into the pool of historical revisionism to create its fairy tale. Rather than just honestly handle the challenges that a woman of color would face in trying to own her own property and business in 1926, Disney just prances around the issue with delicate allusions to racism. In this colorful alternate New Orleans, Tiana seems to get along just fine with the daughter of Big Daddy, the wealthiest man in New Orleans whose fortune is 100% no question built on the backs of slavery. But no! Big Daddy and the sugar barons and the cotton kings aren't the villains of this story. That would be too uncomfortable for white audiences to swallow. No, the villain of this movie is a voodoo practitioner. Tiana is so good. She deserves a better movie. Where's this chick from? This paragon of womanhood is riding around on trolley cars in 1926 New Orleans in the good old US of A. But that isn't her kingdom. Or is it? Her husband, Naveen, is the Prince of Maldonia. That's a fake country. The name is a combination of the Maldives, which is an island off the coast of India, and Macedonia, which is a region in the Balkans. And the fake language that Naveen speaks, called Malkadesh, is based on Italian. So, I'm gonna lean toward Maldonia being somewhere in the Mediterranean Aegean area. Watch how this works. 20 years before the events of the movie, Macedonia is part of the Ottoman Empire, with the Greeks and the Bulgarians fighting to take little pieces of the territory away. Then, in 1912 and 1913, the Ottoman Empire was challenged and largely defeated by the Greeks and 4 emerging Balkan states who claimed their independence. These short wars contributed to the conditions of World War I, and they left the 4 states arguing and dissatisfied over the distribution of Macedonia. So, I'm putting Naveen and his family here. Let's pretend that among these broken up pieces of Macedonia, a tiny nation called Maldonia, hotly contested, emerged. But is Tiana the Princess of Maldonia in practice, not just by marriage? At the end of the movie, she's happily running her restaurant in New Orleans with her royal husband. The king and queen of Maldonia come to visit, so they're still alive and in power. And unless Tiana just opened the place for one night of dancing and boozing before jetting off, it looks like Tiana is rooted pretty firmly in America, and so is Naveen. I think Naveen is the club's mincer/musician, not an active member of Maldonian court. So where does that even put Tiana and Naveen in 1926? Tiana's kingdom? I almost don't want her to have a kingdom, and she could just keep the fancy title and the hot husband. Tiana never wanted to be a princess. Her entire life's ambition was to be a restaurateur. So the best case scenario is that mom and dad realize that Naveen is not cut out for a leadership role. And frankly, they're just happy he met a nice girl who kicks his ass in gear on occasion. And so they continue to rule, and then they pass the kingdom on to Naveen's younger brother when he hits his majority. Naveen would happily abdicate. But then that's the end of the video. This is what dreams are made of. Can't happen. Tiana deserves a ranking just as much as the other gals. She's just not gonna be happy about it. And neither am I. So let's say the king and queen kick the bucket, Tiana boards up the restaurant, and then she and Naveen fly to Maldonia and take over the throne. So what's going on in Maldonia, Macedonia? Nowadays, the entirety of Greek Macedonia is less than 3 million people. So I'd say that back in 1926, Maldonia was a tiny coastal nation with maybe 100,000 or so citizens at most. Whichever side itty-bitty Maldonia took in World War I, it's likely suffering hard in the aftermath. In 1918, the Macedonian front was hit by the Germans and the Bulgarians and the French and the Serbians and the Brits and the Greeks, and there were massive casualties and poisoned landscapes as a result. And if Tiana arrives somewhere between the late 1920s and early 1930s, then there's not a lot of time before World War II starts, and historically, Macedonia was occupied by the Axis powers. Maldonia is recovering from one war, on the brink of another, and trying to fight off land grabs from the Greeks and Bulgarians who want to subsume it. Tiana as princess. Unafraid of toil like a good Hufflepuff, but ambitious like a Slytherin, Tiana works 2 jobs to save enough money to open her own restaurant. She has vision and determination, she's sensible, yet sentimental. Sometimes it could take her a while to arrive at the obvious point, but she understands the value of love and the people in her life who are most important to her. Tiana raises enough money to open her own restaurant on her own terms, which is what makes the end of the movie so satisfying. She didn't accept handouts even when Charlotte would likely have given her the money for the sugar mill. She worked hard and got the place, no wishing stars or fairy godmothers required. The hunky prince was just a bonus. Her dream is fulfilled. She got everything she wanted and what she didn't think to ask for. So to make her Princess of Maldonia in action seems almost unfair, but I'm gonna do it. Does Tiana have what it takes to keep Maldonia firmly independent, enforce its borders, and bolster its post-war economy? This is gonna hurt me so much. Diplomacy. To keep Maldonia independent from Greece and Bulgaria, Tiana and Naveen need to secure strong allies. Tiana doesn't bring any from New Orleans with her besides a talking alligator. Mama Odie is maybe magical, but at her age I think it's safe to assume that she's gonna stay in the bayou. Can she make allies instead? Tiana shows a willingness to do heavy lifting, so if she puts her nose to the grindstone, reads up on all of her neighbors, and then cooks up a huge batch of beignets to win over foreign hearts, I think she's at least cut out to try. She is impatient with people who don't have to do hard work though, so she'd have to bite her tongue talking to neighboring kings and queens who don't do the hard work of running their own kingdom. She's good at driving a hard bargain though, so I think she could keep her focus in long negotiations and she wouldn't be swayed by courtly flattery. 10 out of 20. Optics. Tiana has 3 major things against her. The first we've discussed before. She's a woman of color in 1926. No one in Europe wants to see her in power. The second is that she's a foreign-born wife and not a nice Maldonian girl. The third is that she and her husband have been absent during the World War I aftermath, living it up in high style in Jazz Age America. The people of Maldonia would probably not be too pleased to put their future in the hands of a king who spent all of his money on girls and booze, and a queen who's never set foot in the country. She can salvage part of her reputation, though, I think, by showing that she is a woman of the people whose experience more closely matches their own than that of a royal. She can help rebuild the devastated parts of Maldonia and earn some respect that way. 2 out of 10. Economy. Maldonia is almost certainly in a post-war financial crisis. They likely exhausted taxpayer dollars and royal coffers to pay for the defense on the front, and now they're plumb broke. Naveen's proven to have no money management skills, so it falls to Tiana to fix this mess. We know her fiscal skills are good, maybe the best of all the princesses, and she has business savvy. If she sells the restaurant or business before the Great Depression, she can make pretty good money. If Maldonia were a big country, then money from real estate would not be very helpful. But it is so tiny that I think a few tens of thousands of dollars could at least buy everyone a round of hot meals. It would put a little dent in the deficit. Little dent. If Maldonia lost the major masculine workforce in the trenches, Tiana knows enough about running a business to rouse the ladies, Rosie the Riveter style. And if all else fails, she could probably market a royal cookbook, maybe in the States. That way she could turn her passion into cash in. It might not be enough to make up for World War I debt, and it certainly won't be enough for the World War II bills when they start coming in. But it is something, and lots of princesses so far haven't had any options. 12 out of 20. Influence. Naveen will be king and will have primary say in the affairs of the kingdom, so how much say will Tiana have? Lucky for her, Naveen is totally dedicated to Tiana.
I have to do this, and we are running out of time.
I won't let you.
It's the only way to get to your dream.
And Naveen admits to her that he knows he is not cut out for pretty much any job at all.
I admit it was a charmed life until the day my parents cut me off, and suddenly I realized I don't know how to do anything.
Put those 2 things together and you can guarantee that Naveen will do whatever Tiana tells him to. 10 out of 10. Conflict management. Tiana might be able to help boost the small Maldonian economy, or at least get creative with it, but can she dig a little deeper to fix the really big conflicts? Maldonia is a small region highly contested by the Greeks, the Bulgarians, and the Balkan states. It might be small enough to fly under the radar, but I think it's more likely that one of these territories would try and overwhelm it with force and annex it. And I can't think of a single way that Tiana could avoid that. She can't magically manifest an army, and after the First World War and the devastation on the Macedonian front, there would hardly be any soldiers left to fight for Maldonian independence. Tiana's best choice would be to try and pick which power would take over Maldonia, and then work with them in advance to compromise. Maybe she can try and retain a little bit of power and keep the status quo of Maldonia, even if everyone's now flying under the Greek banner. But with most allied powers in countries far away, it's very likely that what's left of Maldonia would be occupied by the Axis powers, which I'm sure Tiana would not be happy about. Truly, I can't think of a character in the Disney canon that would want to be Princess less. She'd be far away from her passion and her family in a dying nation. 0 out of 40. This brings Tiana to a grand total of... Don't say it, 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 don't say it. It's not your fault. You never wanted this life anyway. If you have a different placement or different rating for Tiana, do let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I'm just going to imagine that Naveen abdicated and his brother had to deal with all that. Or his parents. Bye!